So here we go. So good morning again, everyone. I'm hoping you're having a wonderful day. It's our start of the week here in Dubai. It's a Sunday, but we never stop working for some reason. But we're happy because this type of a thing that we're doing today for the CBC Dubai Connect group, for entrepreneurs group with our Outlook 2021 is vital for all sectors, and you're going to find out why. But what I'm going to do for the moment, I'm going to get off my soapbox. We are having this recorded so that you can have it for when you might need it later on. But what we're doing was we have created interactive sessions. So at a certain point, if you're feeling comfortable, we would like to have you on board, also like become our keynote speakers. So that way you can actually interact, find out, talk, give us advice, which we always are welcome to. And so, but I want to tell you why this is possible, because we have our sponsors at CBC Dubai. So our sponsors are what make and really make things happen for you guys as well. So I want to give a special shout out to all our sponsors, and some of you may know as well. Please go to our website and see who they are. Give them a shout out. When you see us on our social media platforms, make sure you like and love them, because they're the reason why we're here today. So good morning, Ruda. Can I kick this off to you?
Yes, of course. Good morning, everyone. Happy Sunday to everyone. And for those who aren't familiar, my name is Ruda. I'm the chairman of the Canadian Business Council of Dubai. And I really want to welcome all of you to the second event ever hosted by the CBC's Entrepreneurs Connect Group. You know, for 25 years, the CBC in Dubai has been helping Canadians and Canadian alumni build relationships and knowledge in order to succeed in the UAE. And one of our goals over the course of this year has been to create sort of smaller opportunities for our members to connect in smaller gatherings that more closely align with their core interests and specializations. And we call this initiative the Connect Group. And the goal of the Entrepreneurs Connect Group in particular is to focus on creating a platform for entrepreneurs to share insights and opportunities with one another, and in order to help each other grow and develop their businesses. Our focus initially within the Entrepreneurs Connect Group has been on looking at the outlook for 2021, which, as most of you will know, is an incredibly interesting year coming out of COVID-19. And we are joined by an esteemed group of panelists who will be guiding us based on their experience and knowledge of the tourism, real estate sector, and the macroeconomic sector in general. I will encourage you, all of you, we will eventually be bringing all of the participants in this event up to panelist level so that we can have more of an intimate discussion. The way this event should proceed, if things go well, is to think of it as not so much Anthony, Sarah, myself sitting on a stage while you're listening. It's more intended to be the three of us sitting at a table with all of you and having an interesting discussion for the next hour or so. So without taking up too much more airtime, let me introduce and give a quick introduction to our two speakers. So Sarah Gentile started her journey with digital native companies almost more than 10 years ago when she joined Hotels.com as a senior marketing manager for Southern Europe, France, and Benelux, and led the creation of the first EMEA offline campaign for the newly launched loyalty program. Prior to joining Facebook in 2018, Sarah held senior roles at Amazon in Spain, the UK, Luxembourg, in the advertising, retail, app store, payment, and local and payment businesses with a local, regional, and global scope. She also worked on the launch of the first offline campaign for Amazon Prime in Italy and Spain. So if you guys love Amazon, you can thank Sarah for that. In addition to that, she is currently leading the destinations and mega events practice at Facebook. And so she will be giving us an overview on how the tourism sector, or on her outlook on how the tourism sector will develop over the coming year. And I think she will also be able to give us some very good insight into how we can position our businesses in order to take advantage of what is sure to be an uptick in the tourism sector later on in the year, mostly because the tourism sector can't get much worse than it already has been. Second in our roster of speakers is Anthony Capalonga. Anthony's role at GRMC is to ensure value-enhancing initiatives are delivered successfully to clients across multiple industries, and GRMC as a firm in general focuses heavily on real estate and construction. He oversees economic research and business advisory projects covering the GCC and the broader Middle East. With a background in financial economics and banking, Anthony brings us a sound understanding of regional economic growth, development trends, and public policy initiatives. I'm personally very excited about this webinar. I encourage you to ask lots of questions. This is mostly intended to be a small, intimate gathering of like-minded individuals who want to, ask interesting questions to each other, having been through an incredibly interesting year. So I encourage all of you to participate. And without further ado, Sarah, I hand the microphone over to you.
Thank you so much, Ruda, and thank you, Diana, for the great introduction to today. And thank you guys for having me with you. I'm going to share my screen. I've prepared a few slides to support the opening discussion. And then please tell me if you can actually see my screen. Do you see the slide?
Yes, we do. Thanks. It's perfect. Destination UAE.
Perfect. So again, I've been introduced in many more details than I would have used myself. So thank you so much. I've been in the region for the past 2.5 years. And since the beginning of 2020, I've worked as a client partner for travel with a focus on destinations, mega events, and mobility. Obviously, the reason why I decided to move into travel at the beginning of 2020 was that I strongly felt that was the year of travel, which, I mean, didn't really work out for me properly. But I think travel still, especially here in the region, remains one of the most interesting verticals to work in. If we look back at 2019, which is honestly the year that everyone takes into account as a benchmark to where travel should go back to, should rebound, we can see that travel had a very special place in the economy of the UAE. We all know that in the past 10 years, the UAE has tried in many different ways and very successfully to move away from an oil-based economy. And travel has been one of their big bets, part of their vision as a global nation, but also at an emirate level with Dubai and Abu Dhabi, Sharjah, and the others, planning and creating policies able to push travel locally. Back in 2019, before COVID, travel was almost 12% of the total economy, growing at a 5% year on year. And imagine that globally travel has been growing at 3.5%, so much faster than the rest of the world. It also contributed for almost 750,000 jobs. And the expectations, with Expo before COVID was to make it up to 1 million people working in travel, 1 million people out of a population of 9 million, which is impressive. Now, one of the characteristics of this country, and I put here on the side what travel in Canada looks like to give you a different perspective. One of the main characteristics is how travel is segmented. So when we look at leisure versus business, we see that the market is very heavily skewed towards leisure. Almost 80% of all of the revenue generated comes from leisure. But when we look at the split domestic versus international spending, and this is where you can see the main difference with Canada, the domestic spend doesn't even make up for a quarter of the total spend when it comes to travel. So this shows actually how impactful, in unfortunately a negative way, an event like a global pandemic like COVID has been to the UAE, considering the high reliance on international travelers. And as I said, I mean, travel has not been the only thing that has been impacted. Like all of our certainties have been impacted by this fateful event of COVID. So one of the things that the UAE has done in an exceptional way has been in a very agile way to react to what has happened. The UAE is known for very long that they are highly vulnerable. The reliance on international travel is, as we saw before and here, it's almost 80%. Anything that impacts international travel puts the UAE in a very bad position. But all of the policies that have been implemented in the early days, the lockdowns, the curfews, the stop to the flights for a long period, not making anyone coming in, not even transiting through our airports, allowed Dubai and then subsequently the other Emirates to start reopening to the international travelers. So when we look at the overall year, when the Middle East has seen a reduction of 76% in terms of international travel, the UAE has been able to keep those losses at a 67%. And these are data up to November. We know that December was a great month for Dubai in particular, reopening and creating special corridor with some European and other Asian countries. So the final 2020 overview looks also better than what we're seeing here. And all of the policies that have been implemented, everything that Dubai has done, is actually what contributes to a much more positive outlook for 2021 than many other regions and countries can actually claim. Now, one of the things that we've learned, I think last year, and we probably are all in the same boat, is that the only certainty we have is going to be uncertainty. So most of these trends that I'm going to share are based on what we have learned towards the end of the year. We know that things change overnight. We know that despite Dubai and the UAE can be open, unless other countries are letting people travel, we might not achieve the goals that we want, but things seem to be progressing the way the UAE wanted and the way the UAE planned for. And the big advantage that the UAE has at the moment is that a lot of top bucket list destinations like France, Italy, Spain are closed to international tourists outside of the European Union. So there is now a possibility to become top of mind for a market that is even broader than the market that the UAE was appealing to. And on top of this, leverage even more Expo to get as many people as possible in the countries, either in the short term or to make sure that there is an intent to travel that is going to develop towards the end of the year when the countries are going to roll out vaccinations more, or when the country here is going to be fully vaccinated and people are going to be allowed to travel here. So looking at the top themes that are going to be relevant, in my opinion, the first one is high, as I just mentioned, how high versus low COVID impact areas are going to be driving the success or the non-success of a nation. And I think here the trend is very positive. We've seen it in Q4, and it's going to continue this way, given all of the policies implemented. Domestic versus international, this has been a trend that has shown itself ever since the beginning. Given the lack of restriction at the domestic level, people are more likely to travel within the borders. However, we saw also that the weight of domestic spend is much lower. And businesses here in the country have been extremely smart to make sure that specific offers, new ways of doing business were created specifically for a domestic market to make sure that they would decide not to leave and stay here and still have the same experiences. Leisure is supposed to be the one re-emerging faster than business. And again, considering it's the biggest part of the spend, we are in a very good position. The Dubai and the UAE in general have an excellent level of infrastructure and available experiences for people to spend their leisure time and finances in. So this is a big advantage. Business is going to come. Dubai is also a financial center, but it's probably going to come towards the end of the year, beginning of next year. Digital nomads have also been in a trend pre-COVID, but being accentuated more during COVID. These are basically people who do not need a physical presence in the country where they are employed and can work from anywhere in the world. Dubai has been particularly smart in creating not just specific promotion, but also creating the infrastructure to make sure that these people can transfer their whole life here in Dubai, live as residents, even if they're not employed by a Dubai company. There is a huge opportunity to serve this new segment of people coming to Dubai to spend a specific life stage, to work from Dubai, to retire in Dubai. And at the moment, there doesn't seem, other than the Dubai tourism offering, a crafted solution for these specific audiences. So it's an untapped opportunity still. And last but not least, and it's not to sound negative about the outlook, but just to be realistic and understand that, as I said at the beginning, unfortunately, we can't predict anything with certainty. It's very important to look at the trend in terms of interest, but it's also very important to look at the trends in terms of conversion. At the moment, we have interest in travel that is growing. This is mostly, you can mostly deduct this from the increase in searches across different platforms. People want to escape their reality. They want to escape their lockdown. This doesn't always translate in commitment to travel. So it's very important to look at the trend, understand what are the new or the existing source markets where there is a higher chance of converting travelers, and look at targeting and talking to the specific audiences to really make sure to have effective policies and effective activations for our own campaigns. And what I'm going to do, I'm just going to touch in detail the last topic, the one about motivations. And then if you want, we can touch also on the other point. But I think here there is an interesting approach that we have crafted at Facebook to support businesses who want to understand how to move motivations into action, considering the fact that COVID itself has massively changed the context that we are operating in. People want to travel, but the options that they have are limited. People have completely shifted their sense of priority, working before, and now trying to spend more time for their families, their loved ones, but also time for themselves to recharge, to reconnect, to relax. And also the behaviors have changed. We have all, like we are here having a Zoom meeting. We would have otherwise met in a different context. Unfortunately, we have to shift our behaviors because what we are living in doesn't allow us to keep acting the same way as we did before. And so through the analysis of the conversations that occurred on our platform, especially related to the topic of travel and across the globe, we have identified 5 different motives that are pushing people towards traveling and choosing a specific destination. This is not a static picture, like conversations change on a daily basis, depending on whatever is happening around us. But these topics, these motives that have been identified seem to be quite consistent over the time where we have done this observation. And you can see that they are color-coded, and they're color-coded because given this specific point in time, there are some that are much more relevant, that resonate more with people, rather than others that might be extremely important, but within this context, stay a little bit dormant. So for an example, participating in festival and events, or participating, attending parties, versus breaking your daily monotony and try to look forward to something that might happen at a certain time when the restrictions are lifted. So the recommendation that I have is, because this is obviously very specific to the type of business that you're running, is to try and understand, looking also at the conversations that are happening on our platforms and even beyond our platforms. You can look at Google Trends, you can look at different free tools available online that make you understand what the trends are and the conversations are going, and really identify what are the motives behind that move your target audiences, and identify and test which ones are the ones that convert into action better. I'm going to share this presentation with all of you so you can have a look at this. You can, we can start a conversation at any time you want. And last but not least, this is not going to be a trend, but still something that needs to be highlighted. The big elephant in the room, Expo 2020. At the moment, we do not have yet clear what the lineup of Expo 2020 is going to look like. For those who are based in Dubai, I'm sure that you've heard certain pavilions, and the Expo site has been open to public visits. So it's possible to visit the Terra pavilion about sustainability, and 2 more are going to be open in the coming months. For the lineup and how Expo is going to come to life, we might probably have to wait a little bit more, because it's very specific and contingent to what the situation across the globe is going to look like in terms of restriction. But independently from what's going to happen, Expo still remains one of the top opportunities to leverage in the country in 2021 and early 2022. So it's fundamental to have a plan for Expo to make sure that all of those customers who are coming here now or coming here next week are very, very well served and in a way that makes their experience memorable so that they will keep coming back. And with this, Ruda, back to you. And thank you very much for listening.
Sarah, that was an excellent presentation. I have a lot of questions that I want to ask you, and I'm sure our attendees want to ask you as well. But without taking up too much more time, I'm going to ask Anthony if you could pass the mic over to you and get a little bit of an update on how the real estate sector and how the macroeconomic situation in the UAE is going to pan out as well.
Sure, thanks, Ruda. We got there. I'll just share my screen. I just want to start by saying thanks for inviting us along, and it's great to see that events, even be it digital, are happening. So it's great to sort of be here and see this happening. Hopefully, we can progress and have sort of more physical events in the future that the ones that we've used to seeing. So hopefully the UAE carry on this vaccination drive and that can become a reality sort of sooner rather than later. But let me just share my screen so then you've got what I'm looking at here as well. 2 seconds. So we're going to talk about the Dubai residential real estate market today. So before we sort of jump in, I do want to give you a sort of a brief overview of what my company does really. So simply put, GRMC, look, we're here at our very core to make sense of the markets in the GCC and obviously the global MENA region in general. We're a 20-year-old boutique business consultancy and market advisory corporate organization. So the president, let's get back to the presentation today though. So it will be on Dubai residential real estate market. So anyone that's been here for a few years or more, or even looking at it from an international perspective, it doesn't really need an introduction. It's a huge part of the economy over here in the UAE. I'm going to spend a little bit of time talking about the overall market trends. So what the market has been doing currently, the big effect of COVID that's impacted it, and how to obviously to understand the GDP and population of the UAE as a whole, because it's important when we're assessing a market to have a sort of a broader macro look on the market before sort of diving into a sort of a specific sector, and also have a look at the supply, so the freehold residential supply in the region. Again, another highly talked about point is the supply or the oversupply that everyone talks about here in the Middle East. And also want to talk about the price trends that are happening, what we're seeing in the market and the overall sort of transaction analysis, having a look at the types of transactions that are happening, the volume of them, and what we expect the market to do in the future. So let me just, oh, sorry, it's not open, right. So yeah, so market trends. So the real estate industry in Dubai is a key sector. It contributes both significantly, both directly and indirectly to the economy. There has been several volatilities that have hit the market, both from a regional but also international standpoint. Probably the biggest one is the oil price decline of 2014. So this, although Expo 2020 was announced in 2014, and we had an initial sort of surge of activity, let's say, and prices spiked, it was quickly curtailed by the oil price decline, and we've seen that downward trajectory sort of maintained really ever since then, and it hasn't really recovered. But moreover, the volume of transactions that we have seen in the market have remained constant, which is good. So it's busy. There are transactions happening. It's just the price isn't it's carrying on deteriorating essentially. We did hit the bottom in mid 2020. Obviously, COVID-19 was a huge impact on the market. It had a obscene sort of impact across major industries. Steep decline in transactions recorded between March 2020 and May 2020. We're seeing a 27% decline in March alone, followed by 40% and then 20% in April and May respectively. So what we're seeing is most end user buyers delayed plans of buying property, and few international investors were actively engaged in the market because of the COVID lockdown restrictions. So what we're seeing is overseas international investors weren't able to travel to Dubai to actually transact. But we did see quite a huge surge in activity post-lockdown, increasing 55% in June 2020 with a total value of 3.6 billion dirhams. So that trend has continued since then, really. So the general consensus really is that the impact of COVID-19, coupled with the expected delivery of new stock, will continue to exert downward pressure on prices in the short to mid-term, though transaction volume may continue to witness growth or at least remain where it currently is. So that's where we're seeing that. But before we delve further into the supply and the transaction, just a little bit of background, a little bit of a sort of a more macro view on the UAE in general. We've seen here that the UAE continues to strengthen its position as a regional safe haven, if you like, and business hub. So a few key takeaway rankings from research reports is that overall the land mass in the UAE is rated at 117 across the countries in the world, and it's got 104. It's ranked 104 in total population, but it punches well above its weight in brand asset value, actually ranking in the first. Its sovereign wealth fund is ranked third in the world. It's got a global business index of 4th, so it's ranking quite highly as an influential country as well in the top 10. And also logistics has jumped up quite significantly for the region, being sort of the hub that it is in the middle of the world. It's ranked 11 as a logistics hub. So the UAE has been one of the most successful Gulf states, and of course we can't talk about the UAE and Dubai in general without mentioning sort of oil hydrocarbon industry. However, the UAE has been one of the most successful Gulf states when it comes to diversifying its economy away from hydrocarbons extraction, which accounted for just over a quarter of the real GDP in 2019. So we know, however, that oil prices and production remain strong determinants of broad economic sentiment, given that they give the government's ability to maintain generous sort of fiscal policy in the region as well. So we can see here that the population, obviously due to COVID, has had quite a steep decline, being a very transient population, obviously expatriate-led workforce. There was an exodus that happened during COVID, and you can see the population dip quite significantly there, along with GDP hitting an all-time low of sort of minus nearly 6%, and that's expected to recover quite sharply. So we're looking at getting back to 2019 sort of levels quite soon in 2023 in terms of population, and also our growth rate is expected to recover significantly in 2022 at 4.3% there, and then carry on at the typical sort of average growth rate of around 2 to 3% annually thereafter. I'm just going to move on now to bear with me, the actual real estate supply now. So residential real estate supply, we can see here that naturally, being a cosmopolitan city that Dubai is, 80% of the supply is in apartments. Typically, also this is important because obviously investors typically are attracted to apartments as well, just because it's cheaper stock. And what we've seen in the past is that the UAE has sort of remained a investor-driven market historically. So investors sort of enter in the market, whether that's international and local, enter the market. They have a plan to purchase some real estate and then flip it sort of a few years after. Hence, we've seen the big, in 08, 09, anything pre sort of 2012, we've seen big double-digit fluctuations in the market, where we've now seen a normalization period set in, where we're only seeing single-digit, growth or decline in this case, which is more akin to what you see in more developed markets around the world, let's say the UK or the US, etc. These big swings in market movement, we're not going to see as much. So the total stock here in the UAE, as you can see here in Dubai, sorry, is 390,000 units overall. So, but what's interesting to take note here is that launches throughout 2015 to 2017, we've seen a 30% year-on-year increase, which naturally have led to that oversupply. So in 2017, you can see here the launches sort of grew significantly, and typically it takes 3 to 4 years to realize those units and them actually being delivered. So that's obviously caused 2021, as you can see, it's just spiked significantly with the huge oversupply. So what developers are now doing, they're intentionally, what we're seeing in the market is they're intentionally holding back delivery of these units. So what we're now seeing is that you're seeing that 50% of these are going to be held back and sort of drip fed into the market over the next sort of 12 to 18 months, which is quite interesting and sort of backs up the figures really, because obviously with this oversupply of real estate, naturally you're not going to see an incline in price. It's gonna keep that suppressed because of the oversupply. So moving on to actual, let's have a look at the real estate price trends in the market. 2 seconds. So from here you've got 2015 to 2019. Let's focus on villas first. You've got an average villa price drop of around -4%, whereas from 2020 onwards, you've actually seen villa prices remain constant and an average of actually 20%. So we've sort of focused more in depth on a month-by-month basis from January to December 20, and villa prices have remained constant. So what's led to that is people want a little bit more space. They can see that apartments dropped significantly around the time just after the lockdown. So I think garden space came to the forefront of people's mindsets, and what we typically saw with investors being predominantly in the market and transacting and buying properties, it's since turned into a sort of a more of an end user market. So hence why you've seen a natural shift towards villas. So in 2019, you can see that the market was already weakening, and then obviously obviously the pandemic hit in March, April time, and then you can see the price sort of falling off a cliff there for apartments. So now we're just going to move on to the transaction analysis. So as you can see, so from sort of 2015 to 2020 onwards, the actual amount of transactions haven't changed that greatly. So with all of what we've experienced, even 2020, COVID, included, transactions have remained around that 31,000 sort of barrier. It's just the price that has been suppressed and kept lower because of that. 2 seconds. Yes, as you can see, it's just bundled along there. So just closing off now, just having a bit more of a market outlook and what we can expect from the future. While the outlook for transaction volumes is positive, we estimate that it will remain at quite an active market. The expectation on price evolution is somewhat contained, so with limited increase expected over the short to medium term. The market has been a buyer's market over the past several years, and COVID-19 has just accelerated and cemented that, really. So price discounts and generous payment plans and fee waivers and guaranteed return on investment schemes that developers are doing are obviously trying to support the market and entice investors back into what remains a relatively sort of subdued appetite that they have currently. So price corrected communities, we're seeing, so the major communities, obviously because of what's happened, the shift towards apartment to villa, we're seeing communities that have sort of full service amenities such as Damac Hills, Dubai Hills Estate. We're seeing the town square developments, etc. They're proving quite popular and they're sort of holding their value. So we expect that trend to continue. In relation to sort of what developers are offering on discounts, they're kind of quite reluctant to anything sort of that's close to completion or being handed over already. They're reluctant to offer, let's just say, generous pricing plans, whereas developments that are still some way away from being handed over, we're seeing very, very attractive payment option plans, and that's the developers constantly trying to entice this subdued investor interest. So demand and from international buyers will always remain strong. Typically from India, as Dubai is considered the ideal option to park and invest money. So also gaining momentum from China as well, hugely. And funnily enough, the investor appetite from Saudi Arabia is expected to sort of slow slightly, but only just because of the large scale projects that are underway in Saudi itself and the vision, the 2030 vision that obviously is witnessed there. So, but overall, the market is expected to remain resilient on transactions, and albeit we're seeing a maturing market. I just want to close off by saying we are seeing a more maturing market now, where sort of double-digit declines and double-digit spikes are not going to be the norm anymore, given sort of exceptional circumstances. So we are seeing it's by no means, where the US is in terms of real estate or UK, etc. But it's a slow normalization effect is happening, and I think it's great to see that obviously Expo 2020 is going to be great to see what impact that has. I think a lot of that's already been factored in, but if we can have a successful sort of Expo 2020, that'll only have more positive effect moving forward. So I like to end on a positive note, because I think there is a lot of doom and gloom in the market. Everyone expects, everyone talks about, the Dubai market is going to implode soon, or but at the end of the day, I think it will hold strong, and it's just that normalization period that we're going through. It's very much in its infancy compared to other developed markets. So that's what you're witnessing here. So yeah, I've talked enough, so I'll close it off there. And yeah, thanks again for inviting us on, and thanks.
Thank you very much, Anthony. That was fantastic. So I do have a few questions for the both of you. I mean, these are more than anything else. I think my questions are oriented towards just getting a point of view in terms of what you guys think based on your knowledge and your experience in both doing research and having an understanding of the numbers when it comes to the macroeconomic situation in the UAE and with respect to tourism globally. Because Sarah, of course, I know you focus a lot on just tourism industries and destination marketing in general. If you were a tour operator, if you were focusing in, if you made a lot of, if your business was focused on bringing people from overseas to the UAE, where do you think you would focus your advertising dollars, as it were, at the moment? Like, what do you think will be the best feeder markets? Obviously, subject to COVID conditions and what have you. But where do you see the highest impact?
So it's a very good question, and the answer is not definitely one, in the sense that things are changing so often, and the regulations are, even if we say aside COVID regulations, they're one of the main factors that impact which ones are the markets most likely to be source markets. Now, when it comes to the UAE in particular, you have some markets that, because of proximity or because of certain situations, like for instance, India is the top source market for Dubai. The data from the most recent data from January 2021 show that most of the international arrivals came from India. The reason being that there are a lot of people coming from India to work here. So visiting relative and friends and relative, VFR, is one of the top motivations for people to travel now. They have family here, so they fly in from India. So looking at some specific market conditions, so understanding where, which ones are the source markets that are more likely to be pushed by certain motivations. So we saw before visiting family and friends, but all of the list of motivations that I shared, there might be some markets in a situation that is more likely to make things happen rather than others. And then keep monitoring both the policies that are issued by the governments and the trends. And from a combination of the two, you can start and prioritize the markets on which to focus. So for instance, there was that travel corridor that was created back in December between the UAE and the UK. Obviously, those are decisions that are made at a governmental level. But the amount of travelers that we got in from the UK was so massive that actually at this point in time, well, back in January 2021, they were the second largest group of international tourists coming. Russia also, there is a pretty good movement of Russians coming to Dubai that has been quite constant, actually. So Russia is now the third country that sends most of the people into Dubai. So always looking at these things and where the vaccines are rolling out, what the government are easing the mobility outside of the borders of the country. Those are the things that are really going to define where to focus. It's a bit different from before, where you could tap more into, creating a dream image or positioning for your destinations. Now there are some needs and some, contingencies that you cannot do without.
And, related to that, what tools would you recommend to try and, our members go to try and find out, what are the biggest motivations for travel? If let's say you're a tour operator or you're a company that specializes in tourism from India, the UK, and Switzerland, what tools would you recommend we use in order to try and suss out what are the key motivations? How do you keep your finger on the pulse in those markets?
Honestly, the information that you have about your existing customers or people who have been your customers, so the historical information is a great source of insights. So you will be, hopefully, if you own a database that allows you to keep track of certain information, like where the person is coming from, what type of, let's assume you're a tour operator, you sell different types of experiences like adventure in the deserts rather than visiting the Dubai aquarium. You can try and cross-reference that information to see if there is a pattern of what different people coming from specific countries or different demographics are more interested in. And then there is that list of motivations that I shared before, where you actually see that there are some emerging trends, especially after COVID has hit us so badly in our daily lives, that are actually common across the board. Like, people really need to reset. People need to relax and reconnect with their loved ones after a period where they've been separated from them. It is necessary to test and learn which ones of the new emerging trends are resonating more with them. So you have to couple what you already know about specific demographics or specific target audiences with some emerging trends that you have to test and understand if they're resonating or not. However, I said before, if you want to spend money effectively and efficiently, obviously you should focus on the countries that are more likely to drive a short-term influx of people towards the UAE or towards any of the market where you're interested in driving people. However, you can also work on a medium to long-term basis, building your brand, making sure that people know who you are, what to do, and still keep top of mind, which is an investment that is not going to drive results in the immediate, but it might give you benefits over the long run. However, considering people cannot travel depending on the business, I wouldn't recommend everyone to do that.
Interesting.
Ruda, may I interrupt for a second? A few people had to go off, and so they actually sent a question out. Can I just throw one of the questions out because they really, sorry, Anthony, I think this is for both of you. They're saying how the new visa regulations, you know, I mean, those are obviously not static either. Those are changing, that they might be influencing either the tourism or actually real estate or any type of business ownership here in Dubai. I mean, we have, you know, the new retirement visas, the golden visas. You touched upon, Sarah, if I remember correctly, the idea of being able to work remotely. So Anthony, do you mind kicking it off first? I mean, I find that absolutely fascinating because we probably have a new flux of tourism, as we were saying, going to stay for 2 years and end up being here more kind of thing. So maybe you can touch on that.
Yeah, no, that's right. So yeah, the UAE is opening up more and more, right? So they are extending visas for certain certain people in certain sectors. You've got the investors visas that were always there in the first place, but the time span of those is getting more and more. So yeah, they're opening up, and also when it comes to retirement as well. So I think that advisors within the economy have opened up to accepting the grey dollar, right? So in most economies, obviously we've got a very young population here, and it's a workforce population probably. And you can see that at play when it came to the COVID infection rate, etc. It wasn't as bad as other countries, right? Because you're simply not, you don't have as many older people here, so they don't get as affected. So, but you've got this grey dollar that they're trying to tap into, I think, and it's a huge part of other economies, right? And for that to be, and for the UAE to have that opened up here, you can only entice them here by opening up and by accepting them and opening up these visas. So it's it's definitely interesting times, and I think it can only help the economy. And hopefully we can see it to fruition. We just need COVID to sort of get out of the way and slowly normality resume. I don't know. The longer it goes on, obviously, the more that people's habits will change. But I think the human race is fickle, and it will go back to, hopefully normality will resume sooner rather than later. So, but yeah, it can only be a good thing for it. So yeah, we welcome that, and it'd be interesting to have a research piece, because obviously, if a client comes along and asks us for that, we'd love to sort of tackle that project, because I think it'd be very interesting to find out exactly how it will affect. And you can do that by actually research and actually getting out there and doing the primary research and actually asking people what their thoughts and opinions are, and then you can actually put that into, analyze it going further. But yeah, it's a good point, and hopefully it happens.
Well, that's really valid. I think you've got it, right on the spot, because the fact that maybe that some people will use this as a tax haven, and then they just find that this the great quality of life that's here. That's usually what happens. It's very addictive. I think that Sarah, you might be able to actually add something to that too. I mean, I can see, like you said, you had a huge flux of people coming from, England or from English speaking countries or even from Russia. And it is, I mean, we do have young at heart here, but I'd like to see, and I think maybe too, let's say a more mature person might have maybe the actual funds to actually take part in these visas that we maybe haven't put apart yet, some of us.
Yeah, I think I agree with what Anthony said, and I agree with you. One of the words to take into account when we look at these new visa options is funds. There is a very specific audience that Dubai is going after, the rich and the affluent. There are minimum requirements of $5,000 if you want to have a work visa, like the work from Dubai. So you need to earn a net of $5,000 in the country where you are employed. And you need to show proof of that happening for the past 3 months. And you also need to pay for the visa and make sure that you have enough money to sustain your life here in Dubai. And when it comes also to the retire in Dubai, there are also some requirements of having either a minimum monthly income of 20,000 dirham or to own 1 million dirhams in savings. So this is not for everyone, it's for a specific type of people. The ones that are, like Anthony was mentioning, those segments are extremely important for the countries where they will come from, because if they don't spend the money in their own country and they're spending the money here, those countries are going to be at a loss. And by staying here with the visa, the workers are technically offered also the exemption from income tax, which is an extremely appealing point and USP. However, not all companies allow workers to work remotely. Not all countries will see this in a good way. I think it's what is missing that Anthony was highlighting is a study that tells us what's the size of these segments, these new segments of people coming into Dubai that we're looking at. Are we talking about thousands? Are we talking about hundreds of thousands? What is their profile? That is really going to help people who are here running businesses understand how to best serve the needs of these new segments. One of the things, though, that is one of the global trends, but seems to be happening also here in the UAE, is the increase of short-term stays being the chosen option of accommodation. So there are a lot of people, a lot of hotels, a lot of apartments that have switched their approach. Instead of renting the 12 months, they're now open to rent you for 3 months, for 4 months, for any time you need. So a lot of people are coming even and working here without this legitimate visa. So they come in as tourists, but they just work from home. They work from here as they could work elsewhere. And those people are still spending money here. And those people are still worth serving whichever way they might need. But there is no way of tracking them other than, through some channels. If you want to do some advertising, some channels and some signals that can make you understand the specific situation of a person, or at least figure.
One of the things that's, Diana, sorry, are there any more questions before I interject?
Actually, there's just one in the chat if you want to check that out. That was probably written in through an email. Can you see the last question on the chat there?
The Dubai 2040 Urban Master Plan?
Yes, please.
I have to be honest, I'm not even familiar with the Dubai 2040 Urban Master Plan. So, I mean, the question is, how will this initiative affect both tourism and real estate? And actually, I think a corollary to that is that Dubai is making a lot of effort in order to try and establish itself as one of the best places to live in the world. And what struck me from both of your presentations, Sarah and Anthony, is that the clear opportunity to sort of hedge the gap between what's happening in the real estate market and what's happening in tourism is to really focus in on those digital nomads. To focus in to say that, listen, you may not be getting the returns you used to, and you certainly won't be getting that on capital gain for the next little while in terms of your real estate holdings. But certainly, if you focus in on digital nomads, get into the short-term real estate business, maybe put your house up on Airbnb or some of the longer-term platforms, there may be an opportunity there to recoup some of those funds. That'll raise a second interesting question for you, Anthony, in terms of migration. Do you anticipate there being a reasonable uptick in terms of the number of people moving back into the UAE? Because I was really struck by the fact that we lost almost 800,000 people over the course of last year. And Sarah, the same will be true for you. Will you start to notice people switching their Facebook accounts, switching their locations to be in the UAE? Are you seeing any movement in that vein?
Thanks, Ruda. Yeah, it was, look, being quite a transient population, most of the workforce is expatriate. So I think a lot of companies, a lot of corporates, we've never been through what we went through. It's never happened in our lives. I mean, the closest I can even think of or something like that is being in a war. But even during a war, you had some sort of war economy that's at play, right? Whereas this was a complete shutdown. It was a health crisis, but it was a complete economic shutdown to try and contain it. So we lost a lot of people, whether that's through redundancies, etc. We are expected to see that population bounce back in 2023. And then normal growth rate sort of apply, which is typically sort of bubbling around that sort of 2 to 2.5%, year-on-year basis. So it's, it's new territory. So we'll see. The newly released sort of 2040 master plan, I think, has highlighted a key sort of theme that's happening, and you said it yourself, where we're trying to make it one of the best cities to live in the world, right? So you can see in that plan there's a lot of focus on making it greener, a lot of environmental, social, governance aspects, sustainability that's at play here, and so we're but it's, as I said, it's at the very infancy of that, whereas other industries, other markets have been looking at sustainability for a few years now. We're just starting to focus on that now. So it can only be a good thing, and quite frankly, it's positive, and it'd be good to see it happen.
I totally agree. I think it's a great thing that now Dubai is jumping on this trend of making the city more sustainable, trying and sell not just the dream, the luxury, the sparkling, but also a different level of quality of life. It's those attributes, those elements that have become much more important for people and in people's mindset after COVID has hit us so badly. Sustainability, sustainable travel are top of mind for a lot of travelers. Understanding the impact that we have on the environment and what we have caused for ourselves, like COVID and so much more. People are much more informed about this because we all lived it. Before, it was a very niche kind of focus. There were some people who have been doing sustainable travel for so long. Now it's becoming a focus. So people are much more aware of this. And I think that Dubai offering also this aspect and this type of quality of life is trying to build an edge. The good thing for Dubai and for us living here is that the government is really active in backing up the recovery, which is a luxury that not many other countries can have. So they're building a competitive advantage that is going to be really, really, really difficult to catch up for other countries who might be focusing at this moment on other issues, COVID related. So I think we're going to see a lot of great things in the coming years, even before 2040.
With that, we will close our session. Sarah and Anthony, that was incredibly informative, and thank you so much for taking the time for delivering frankly, very relevant and very poignant presentations, but also giving really detailed and direct answers to the questions that were asked. Thank you so much for your time. We hope to have you back for a future.
Thank you so much.
Thanks, Ruda.
Yes,
And
thank you very much.
guys.
Yes, there had been so many other comments and questions in the background. We want to be respectful of your time. So we'll make sure you get them if that's the case. So we want to thank you. And they're so excited because they know that this is recorded so they can see it at their leisure. Have a lovely day. And here's looking to more prosperity for everyone. Okay, take good care.
Thank
Right,
you.
thanks, everyone. Bye.
Bye.